Sure.
The reason I bring up the question is because the new head of the Gaming Commission recently said that it'll be 2016 before we see any licenses actually granted. So, and considering that the big thrust of the bill was that, oh, we're going to make all this money, this bill's going to pretty much cure all our ills, I think waiting from now, that's 2016, what, 4 years from now, that's a long time. So that's why I bring it up. I think that is bogged down, and I think whichever one of you gets elected, you should make that a priority, but that's it.
Anything to add on that?
On that specifically,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, Claire? No?
I'd like to see the market play out, and I haven't seen the evidence that it's bogged down from a bureaucratic perspective yet. I think it's too early for that.
Okay, I guess we'll go to Dave.
MassInc did a study of state budget spending trends. The trends show a pattern of increases in spending that outpace the rate of revenue growth. Would you seek increased revenue or spending cuts to fix this problem? And what specific taxes or cuts would you propose, depending on your point of view?
Claire?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, and this is across the board, the fixed costs are increasing at a rate that's greater than the revenue growth. So at some point, there's going to be a tug between what we have and what we need. So what would happen here in this situation is we're going to have to peel apart the layers and find out what programs. There are probably some programs that we could trim, but I think what you have to do in a lot of the thing is look for where the fraud and waste is, because I think if you look across the board, we can find that anywhere. And I think what I would do is work in whatever system it is, whether it would be money we're spending on pension, anything. There are abuses in the system, so I would look to curb that before we started cutting programs.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I think one of the key areas that's happening is healthcare, and you saw it here in Brockton dramatically with the city council vote on the GIC, and I think the lesson to be learned from that was that it didn't deal with the problem until it was a crisis. Compare and contrast that to what we did in Easton is we saw that this healthcare was going to be a huge piece of our budget if we didn't do something. So started negotiating with the unions about 3 or 4 years ago, getting out ahead of the problem. So when we were faced with that GIC bill, instead of the $5 million issue it was here in Brockton, it was about $70,000 because we had already increased copays, we'd increased deductibles, we'd done it with the cooperation of the unions. We had incredible cooperation from the unions. They were fantastic. And so when it got down to it, it was about $70,000. And we looked at each other from the Board of Selectmen to the unions and said, we can do this. We don't need to drop the hammer on you. So the point is, planning ahead is the key. Being creative. I just mentioned the relationship with Shields MRI, things like that. That's going to save $150,000. You got to be creative, and you got to identify the areas that the costs are increasing and address them before it becomes a crisis. And that's what I'm talking about with these unfunded liabilities. If we don't have a plan to address them, they're going to become a bigger piece of the budget. Nobody's talking about it right now, but in 5 or 6 years, when it becomes such a big piece of your budget that either taxes are going up or services are being cut, then it's going to be a problem. I think leadership is getting out ahead of that.
Claire, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add quite a bit on this one. When Dan speaks of the unfunded liabilities, I have been advised that the unfunded liabilities in Brockton are $700,000 on the pension end of things, the health care. I've been told that if the GIC had passed in Brockton, Brockton would have realized probably $100 million in savings on those unfunded liabilities. That means Easton, in the same token, the $100 million that Brockton would have saved on the unfunded liabilities is about 1/7. So if Easton has $100 million in unfunded liabilities, as Dan has said on the thing, that would be a realization to Easton of probably roughly around $12 million.
If we did what? I'm not following.
If the GIC were...
No, that's wrong, because we...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Okay. So on the unfunded liabilities, you're talking about a $70,000 savings on the present things that are going on. But when we're talking about the unfunded liabilities, it would probably be about $12 million. Now, in Brockton, it was a very, very hard and difficult vote for many of the members of the Brockton City Council, and they did invoke the rule of necessity to vote on this, and many of them took a lot of flack for their vote on that. Now, in Easton, the GIC passed, and Dan, you know, this has been sort of the hallmark of your campaign, these unfunded liabilities, and when the vote came in Easton, you didn't even vote. You abstained from the vote. So I'd
So,
like you to address
A
that.
couple issues. I abstained from the vote because my mother works in the system. My mother's a librarian in the school system, and it's not appropriate for me to vote on that. But we did not, you just said we passed the GIC, we did not.
Oh, I misspoke.
Okay,
You
sorry.
didn't
So
adopt
we did
the
not adopt it,
GIC.
yeah, and but I fully supported the move not to adopt it because of what I said, and the reason I abstained was because I have a family member who was involved. You know, we don't have rule of necessity. I don't know. I understand that they had to do that because they're on the system, but we don't have that. So that's why I abstained. But the underlying argument you're making is not correct, and the reason is that your math is wrong because we made those changes already. So by adopting the GIC had such a small impact on our present day, it would have had the same small impact on the unfunded liabilities. It's the problem. The problem was in Brockton that they didn't address those things, and that's why it continues to grow. So you can't. It's not apples to apples. We had already made those changes. Those savings had already been incurred both on the present value side and on the unfunded liability side.
Claire, do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, well, I guess I would go along with the, you know, this is the hallmark of your campaign, and you're now raising an issue that you perhaps had a conflict. So if you had a conflict then, you have a conflict in the future. So how do you reconcile your push for this, let's solve the unfunded liabilities, yet you want to be a state representative and remain on as a selectman, and you basically said your hands are tied?
No, I didn't say my hands tied. It was inappropriate for me to vote on something that directly affected a family member. That's a rule. That's a law. There's nothing I can do about that. And you run into these problems all the time when you're involved. No, but that doesn't mean you can't talk about the issue and address it. And I don't know if it's a hallmark of my campaign, but it's certainly something I'm running on. I think we're kicking the can down the road on these things constantly. We're doing it at the national level, and we're paying attention a little bit on the national level, but we're not paying attention on this level, and it's going to be a serious problem. Mayor Balzotti said it was one of the biggest problems Brockton's facing. Jay Cronin says if we don't get it now, it's just going to get worse. And I don't think enough people are talking about it, and that's why I'm in it. So, but again, the fundamental math is wrong. We had already achieved those savings by being ahead of it and planning. So to take the 1/7 because it's 107 million, the math doesn't work. It's not how it works.
Okay, next question. Dave?
Name 3 legislative reforms that you would support for reforming the way the House of Representatives does business.
That would be Claire.
3 legislative reforms. Gee, I'd have to think about that one a little longer.
Do you want to try one at this point, or do you want to pass to Mr. Murphy for the moment, and we'll come back to you?
Yeah, I'll pass.
I already mentioned too earlier, open meeting, subject to open meeting law, like we are in Easton and like the city council and is in Brockton. You can't do anything without posting an agenda 48 hours, and you got to have the door open. If there's too much noise in the hall and you close the door, somebody comes running around and says, open that door, because that's a violation. They don't have that. Again, I talked about procurement. The policies for open procurement need to be applied to the State House as well. So that's 2.
Okay. Claire, you got?
Yeah, I will say one thing. I think one thing that was really important, and it's what the legislature did last year, and that was the ethics reform. And I think whenever you tighten the ethics, it's probably a really good thing. And the legislature did do that the last year.
Okay. Steve?
Would you favor a change in the state tax law that would allow residents to deduct credit card interest on their state income tax returns?
Dan?
No. I think the state tax law is pretty fair. It's 5.3%. It's actually going down a little bit. By a couple years ago, they passed a law that said if revenues exceeded a certain amount, that it was going to drop down. So I think it's going to go to 5.25, and it's pretty straightforward. I think it's very fair. It's essentially a flat tax, and I don't think giving an advantage to somebody who runs up credit card debt and has a lot of interest on their taxes versus somebody who's run their household in a more prudent way, it makes any sense in terms of the tax code. So no, I wouldn't approve of that.
I'll have to say, Dan and I agree on that one as well. Yeah, that would make no sense to me.
Quick
Go ahead.
follow-up, Mark? Neither one of you feels that if they had that, if people had that incentive, or some people use their credit cards because they have no other choice. And you don't feel that that would give them incentive to maybe spend more, jumpstart the economy, knowing that they don't have to pay this, well, they have to pay it, but they would be able to reclaim it back later?
I don't think we want to jumpstart the economy running up more debt. I think that's what got us into this problem at a national level, at a local level, at a state level, and to encourage that at a consumer level, I don't think makes any sense.
Okay. Clear?
I'm on board with Dan on that one.
Okay.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to interject a question. We've heard a lot of similarities. I'd like you to try to differentiate yourself from each other. Okay, we have two nominees from two different parties, Democrat and Republican. There's obviously similarities in people's feelings. Could you differentiate yourselves a little bit more? I'm going to start with Claire.
Well, Dan's a tax guy, and I am not. I'm a lawyer, a practicing lawyer, and I also, as I said, and I've talked about all along the way, I've worked as a mediator. I think the skills acquired as a mediator will allow me to be very effective on Beacon Hill. I'm not sure that a payroll business necessarily is something that will be the greatest skill on Beacon Hill. I mean, I think Dan definitely has an understanding of payroll taxes and unemployment taxes, no doubt about that. But I don't know if that carries over. I think beyond that, I think I have, when we were talking about this district, I think I have a far deeper, greater understanding of the problems that face families and districts. Dan talks about talking to business owners every day, and he does that. And I talk to families every day. I'm in the courtrooms, I'm in the classrooms. I see what the sort of a broader group of people in the district and understand their issues. So I think that's how we differ in some ways.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, so I think Claire's right. It comes down to comparing resumes and what do you think's more important. And I think that's a nice way to run a campaign. It's not to say that this person's bad, because I don't believe Claire's bad, but to say here are the distinctions. Here's what I have done, and here's what I will do, and here's what she has done and what she will do. So, yeah, I think dealing with small business owners, I'd like to object and say I have a little bit more than a payroll business. I have a tax practice with. And I see individuals, when we talk about talking to individuals, I meet with people, several hundred people a year, sit across the table, how was the year? What happened with your job? What happened with unemployment? All these things that come up during a tax conversation. So I'm very connected, and I'm on the street level on those types of things. Families, what are they paying for college? What are the deductions for college? Yeah, I think that small business perspective is needed. I don't think there's enough of it. This is not an anti-Claire statement, because I don't want to make it sound like this, but yeah, I don't think we need a lot more lawyers up there. I think we got a lot of lawyers at Beacon Hill, and I don't think we have enough business people and tax people or accounting people. And on the other side, I volunteered for the Finance Committee because I wanted to get involved in the town, and I've been on the Board of Selectmen now for 2 terms, and I have that experience as well. As I said, I'm going to be sitting in a budget subcommittee meeting tomorrow talking about our budget, forecasting it. So I think the distinctions are that you look at my resume and you look at Claire's, and I think if you make the decision that Claire's resume is better, I think that's perfectly reasonable, and if people believe that, they should vote for Claire. I think that my resume is more valuable at this time.
Claire, you want to
Yeah, sure, I'd like to add to that.
Let you guys go back and forth, no problem.
When you talk about a small business perspective, I think I've got a really good sense of that. I do have my own small business law practice, and I do the mediations as well. But my husband has always had his own business. So in our household, going back to our earliest days of our marriage, trust me, I know the problems of a small business. I understand cash flow problems. Back in the day when Ray had a business that was early on, if you had a cash flow problem, we didn't get a paycheck. Made sure everyone else did, but we didn't. So the small business perspective is certainly there because it's something that I've lived with for 23 years in our own household, that we both have our own businesses. But beyond that, there's one other thing that I think is a major distinction between the two of us, and I think it's what is our commitment to the people of this district, because I have said that I am very willing and able to I have slowed my law practice down just for this campaign because I've realized that what a very intense effort it is to have the campaign. And I believe the job itself, if elected, requires 120%, and I want to do that really well. So I have shown my level of commitment to the position by doing that. Dan has very publicly said that he is going to keep his tax business and his payroll business where he sees 700 clients a year, and during tax season, the legislative season does begin in January, tax season. He also is remaining on as a Board of Selectmen in Easton, which he said for the remaining 2 years of his term. And he's a father with 3 young children. So we're looking at 3 jobs and 3 young children. And I don't believe he will be able to make the same level of commitment to the position as state representative that I will in this race. And I believe that, you know, we do have a duty to the taxpayer and the people that you're working for, that are the people of this district, to be there for them full time.
Time.
Yeah. So
Dan, you have 2 minutes to respond to that, and then we're
There's
going
a lot
to
in
move to
there.
the last
A couple
question.
things, and you know, I think my family, my 3 kids, I'll take care of that. I don't need other people telling me how much time I should spend. I do an okay job with that. I think that's just a little out of bounds, frankly. But I wish I had 700 tax clients that I see every year. I don't, just a couple hundred. But yeah, we do have a distinction on that, and I don't think we want professional politicians. I know I never wanted that. I know that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people with real experience, go up and get the job done. And you're right, I'm going to maintain my connection to the small businesses, to the individual tax clients that I have, and I think that's very important. So yeah, if you, again, here's a nice way to draw a distinction. If you believe that a full-time politician is what you want, then Claire is your choice. I don't think that's the way things should go. I don't want to be a full-time professional politician. I don't think that's what the people want, and I don't think it's healthy. As soon as you do that, you're subject to dependence on re-election, things like that, special interests, and I don't want that. So if I have to make a tough decision and I'm going to get bounced out of office because of it, that's okay. I can live with that, and I'll go back to my business. So yeah, that's a clear distinction between us.
Okay.
May I add one more thing on this?
Can you roll it into your question?
Well, if you talk about a full-time politician, we're not talking about a career politician here. I'm 52 years old. I'm not looking to make a full-time job for the rest of my life as being a full-time politician. And if you want to talk about a career politician, I think when someone is maintaining 2 political jobs at the same time, Board of Selectmen and state representative at the same time, that's a little bit more of a career politician than someone that's willing to make the commitment for the time that they are doing the job, and that's what I'm very willing to do.
30 seconds, Dan, to
Wildly
respond, and then I'm going to let you guys ask
Widely
each other a
different
question.
opinions on what a career politician is. Selectman is an extremely part-time job. I mean, 2 times a week, a month. And we don't make any money. We make $1,800 a year, so you don't get into it for that. So to me, that's not a career. I think that's public service, frankly.
Okay.
So we disagree.
Okay. I'm trying to remember where I left off. Okay, Dan, I'm going to let you ask Claire one question. We have how much time left? 3 minutes. Okay, so quick 1-minute response.
All right, so last time we met, we talked about the SEIU, which has endorsed you, and you've taken money from, about the bill that you weren't sure was passed. That's Mark's Globe Reader, Herald Reader comment. Have you verified that that bill's been passed? Do you agree with it? Do you stand with the SEIU on that bill that required home daycare workers